trained in a large city hospital in the mid-60s, and women were still having their legs strapped down. They were sometimes having their arms strapped down, depending on the resident who was delivering them. It seemed so backward to me. I was largely frightened by the idea that so many things could be done against your will because you were having a baby.
There are those who would argue that birth is inherently dangerous, that no matter what one does, it still retains this level of danger that can't be predicted, and for that reason we have to have all births in the hospital. We've also had the continuation of the specialization of medicine. You know, it went from midwives to doctors, family doctors, to obstetricians, and now we're having further specialization in obstetrics to the development of obstetrical anesthesiologists, maternal fetal medicine specialists, all of which treats mothers less and less as a whole and more as a combination of the carrier of this baby and a risk factor to be addressed to.
In most places in the world that have very good birth outcomes, most of the births are done by midwife, regardless of what class of society you are, what ethnicity you are, and what racial group you consider yourself belonging to.
Regardless of your economic status, your race, your societal level, you are going to benefit from midwifery care. And this is something we know because it works worldwide. So for me, as a European person coming into an American system, I was kind of shocked.
If you look at obstetrics for the last 50 years, what do you find? In the 1930s, they were giving x-rays on every pregnant woman to measure her pelvis. And then in the 1940s, they discovered that that caused the baby to have cancer. So they had to stop it. And then in the 1950s and 60s, they had another drug called thalidomide, which caused babies to be born without arms and legs. And then they had to stop that. But you see, in every case, it was after the fact. In the 1990s, they were giving Cytotec to induce labor in women who had had a previous cesarean. And they ended up with hundreds and hundreds of ruptured uteruses and many dead babies before they found out, finally, in 1999, that they shouldn't do that. But you see, there's not a good history in obstetric practice of careful study of the long-term effects of all these interventions. This is why, if you really want a humanized birth, the best thing to do is to get the hell out of the hospital.
In the hospital, you're not allowed to have very long labors. So if you're not dilating rapidly, which you're likely not to do if you get an epidural early in labor, you will be given Pitocin. They'll put the Pitocin in the IV. It will flow into your veins. Pitocin makes contractions longer and stronger and closer together. So then the pain of labor is much worse. So you go with that for a while because you have the epidural, but eventually the pain of the contractions is overwhelming the epidural. You need to up the epidural, and then labor slows down more because of that, so then you need more Pitocin. Now you're not feeling the pain of the extra Pitocin because you've got the epidural, but your baby is getting compressed blood and oxygen supply because Pitocin contractions last so long and are so strong, the blood and oxygen flow to the baby is compromised. So then the baby's likely to go into distress, and then you're sent off for an emergency cesarean from a baby in distress from contractions induced by the Pitocin, which was necessitated by the epidural.
Step by step, one intervention leads to a series of interventions. And the net result is the mother finally ends up with a cesarean, and everybody says, thank God we were able to do all those interventions to save your baby. The fact of the matter is, if they didn't start the cascade of interventions, none of that would have been necessary.
There is clearly an association with induction.
Have a baby.
And the fact that it's sort of a statusy thing, you know, at the cocktail party to say, oh, I just had an elective C-section. As long as, you know, an elective C-section is like having a Prada bag, then that'll drive it also.
This whole concept of women being too posh to push is a fairly recent phenomenon. You could attribute it to Victoria Spice, the posh Spice Girl who has had 3 C-sections around her husband's soccer schedule. Britney Spears has had 2. The list goes on. I think if celebrities who did have home births, who used midwives, spoke up about it more, we would have a more balanced picture. If Angelina Jolie had had a water birth in Africa, I think that more women would have been clamoring for water birth.
And transformation that I had based on this particular birth experience I mean, it's made me a better mother. It's made me refocus what's important to me with the work I do. And I'm not out there telling people that they should do what I do. What I did for me was best for me. It's not necessarily going to be great for anybody but me. But I really am advocating choice and informed choice, and for midwives to be utilized more in this country.
As a consumer advocate, I'm not here to tell women what the right choice is. I'm not here to tell them they have to have a home birth with a midwife in order to have a good, strong, fulfilling, birth experience. For some women, that is absolutely the way to go, and they should have access to that choice. What I'm here to say is that every woman should take the time and use every resource available to her to become as informed as she possibly can be, so that she really owns this experience that is so important. This is